What should be the modern surprise royal repertoire? So let me just lead into this by referring to the old standard 8 surprise major, or the so-called standard 8, as some people now refer to them as. The origins of this set of 8 methods are rather unclear, and these methods and their merits have been extensively discussed by Simon Linford's excellent pickled egg project, which has resulted in a range of suggestions for an alternative core set of surprise major methods, and then supplementary sets, and so on. And this particular set of proposals actually seems to be gaining some traction and taking off in quite a good way. So we're not going to talk about surprise major anymore. Nevertheless, the old standard 8 surprise major has been over the years the basis for extensions to higher stages. So ringers seem to find it natural to extend the standard 8 from major to royal. And you get basically the same methods, but of course you find that London and superlative don't have clean, unique extensions, but people seem to have settled on London number 3 as a reasonable London-like method on 10, and superlative number 2 is usually run. And back in the 1970s, Chris Kippin composed a series of peals from 4 to 8 methods of splice surprise royal, all the work. And the 8 method version was these 8 methods, and these compositions became great classics and have been rung many, many times. And following Chris Kippin, other composers have produced peals in the same methods, or those methods, plus 1 or 2 or 3 extra ones, or subsets of them. They've become quite solidified. And this set of methods is still reasonably popular for peals if you look at what's reported on Bellboard, but quite uncommon as a practice night repertoire. Now, actually, many years ago now, when I was ringing in London and ringing at Kensington, we did have the standard 8 surprise royal as a regular practice night repertoire, and even on Sundays. But that was really quite exceptional. And then many of us were going out ringing peals, weekend after weekend in these and similar methods. And of course, these methods got extended to Maximus as well. And then these questions of whether there are clear, unique extensions get even worse. And there's a whole range of London-like methods on 12. Newgate is probably the easiest, and then there's Londinium and Barford that are quite popular. And Rutland also has a number of variants. But this combination of Maximus methods is almost never rung as a standard 8 spliced. So I searched Bellboard for splice surprise Maximus brackets 8M to see what was there, and there are no peals of these 8 methods on Bellboard since 2011, and not many before that. And of course, Bellboard doesn't go back all the way. But basically, there's no claim for this set of 8 methods to be any kind of standard 8 surprise Maximus. But I believe there is a de facto modern standard 8 Maximus, which consists of these methods at the top of the slide. So Bristol, Phobos, Zanussi, Ariel, Strathclyde, Avon, Rigel, and Orion. And if you look at the bands who ring lots of peals of spliced Maximus, then you see these methods coming up again and again. Not necessarily all of them in the same peal, but there seem to be several popular subsets. So there's Rabs, there's O-Rabs, there's Bristol, Phobos, Zanussi, and so on. And for those of you who are listening from Scotland, these are the methods we've been selecting from in our 12-bell training weekends at Tulloch. We haven't reached the dizzy heights of Orion yet, but we have rung most of the others, sometimes with reinforcements from the southern branch. Cambridge, Yorkshire, and also Littleport, Little Surprise are quite common in peals of spliced Maximus as well. And there are also several compositions of cyclic spliced maximus that are popular. So there's David Pipe's classic cyclic 6 peel and variations of it. There are several cyclic compositions by John Warboys which get rung a fair bit. And then there are some other more exotic compositions. But I think there's a reasonable claim for those 8 methods at the top to be the modern, you could say, black zone standard 8 Maximus methods. And in fact, just by chance, I happened to see some comments on the Facebook bell ringers group this week, in which Richard Smith referred to this particular set of methods as the standard 8 Maximus. So just to say something about, I said black zone there, so let me just comment on that for a moment. So several years ago, Simon Linford wrote a series of articles in the ringing world, which have been republished more recently with some additional commentary, in which he classified method ringing and change ringing into these color-coded zones, which are based on the classification of levels of difficulty of ski runs. So originally it was blue, red, and black, and then in the recent republication of these articles, Simon added green at the bottom. So the green zone is core changes and plain hunting. So it's the first steps in change ringing. The blue zone is simple rule-based methods like plain bob and things like, I don't know, Granser, St. Clement's, single Oxford, these kind of methods that you know, you can learn as more or less variations of simple ideas. The red zone is where you move into learning complex lines, learning methods by play spells, and that's where the vast majority of surprise minor and surprise major ringing takes place. And then the black zone is Bristol Maximus and above. And in the original articles, Simon made a particular point of saying that Cambridge and Yorkshire Maximus are not in the black zone. And one way of looking at the black zone is that you start to see the return of rule-based ringing, except in a more complicated form. You don't have simple rules, but if you want to take advantage of rule-based ringing at this level, what you have to do is patch together different rules that apply in different regions of a method. And this Facebook discussion that I referred to also included the comment by Richard Smith along these lines. You're in the black zone when you recognize Bristol Maximus as one of the easier methods because of its regular structure. And if I remember correctly, not wanting to put words in his mouth, but Simon Linford made an additional comment to that discussion in which he thought that was a very good characterization of what he meant the black zone to be. So this will eventually come back to something relevant to Surprise Royal, but let's see. So let's have a look at these standard 8 Maximus methods. And I'm just going to show some grids here, not lines. We'll just have a very quick look at each one. So, I'll get a pointer. Yes. Okay. So this is Bristol, and what you see here is lots of structure. Here are the characteristic points at the beginning of the lead. Here are some dodges. There are some fishtails, and you've got this region of hunting and points on the front, which of course is the same upside down as what you have on the back, because Bristol is a double method. So these huge regions of regular structure, and then some twiddly bits. This one is Zanussi. Again, you can see some regular structure up at the back here. You've got some points, some more points, some treble bob work, and on the front, you've got some points. You've got dodges at the half lead. But again, this whole region here looks quite regular. And the key to ringing these kind of methods is to be able to see where these regular regions occur and work out how to take advantage of them when you learn the method. And ideally, you want to get to a point where all you really have to learn explicitly is these kind of twiddly bits, which tend to be when you pass the treble and cross from one zone into another. This is Phobos. Again, you can see a regular back work. Here are fishtails, here are more fishtails. Here's a lot of treble bobbing work. And on the front, you've got this huge, great block, which is wrong hunting on the front six, with some points getting into it and coming out again. And here is aerial. The back work is rather like Zanussi, although a little bit different because there's a fishtail somewhere. And on the front, you've got wrong hunting again, but it's on the front eight, whereas in Phobos, the wrong hunting is on the front six. By the way, I realized when I was producing these diagrams, how much I love looking at them. You know, I mean, having these beautiful method structures to think about and to perform as we do, it's really, you know, that's one of the best aspects of bell ringing for me. So just going on very quickly, here's Strathclyde. The back work is like Glasgow. There's a fishtail immediately. There's another fishtail later on when the treble's in 5/6. Then there's some treble bobbing work. And on the front, you've got these 6th place and 3rd place. There's a bit of 3-bell work and these characteristic dodges in 4/5 going all the way down here. Avon, a bit more difficult, at least I find it more difficult. Again, it's a double method, so the pattern above the treble here is the symmetrical to the pattern on the front. Again, you can see lots of points happening, all the bells doing them simultaneously, but there are also these structures here that look a bit more complicated. You've got these interlocking points, but they're not always in the same place. They're moving up. It's a bit harder to work out how to take advantage of those features. And then you've got Rigel and then Orion, which are the most difficult two. And if you look at those two grids, you can immediately see why Rigel is much easier than Orion. It's because it's got this block of regular wrong hunting on the front, whereas the corresponding part of Orion has got points and places all over the place. But those two methods have the same back work. Again, lots of points going on, but they're not all simultaneous like they are in Bristol and Zanussi. They're slightly offset. So it becomes much harder to take advantage of whatever structure is there. Okay, so let's get back to Major, Royal and Maximus. The surprise major repertoire has been thoroughly overhauled by the Pickled Egg project very successfully. The Maximus ringers had already sorted themselves out and established their own standard. There was no need for a Maximus project Pickled Egg. It had all just been done by what people were ringing. But Royal has not received the same kind of attention, and it's not so clear what the standard surprise Royal methods should be, or delight Royal. So we're not just fixing on surprise, there could be delight methods. So when thinking about what we would like the Royal repertoire to be, we should take into account Royal as a stepping stone to Maximus. That's why I've been going on about these Maximus methods. Maybe we want similar methods on 10. And it also occurred to me that, again, for the Scottish listeners, Royal is quite a good arena for the Scottish Association. We find it much easier to get 10-bell bands together than 12-bell bands. And out of our something like 22 towers in Scotland, 6 of them have got 10 or more bells, and it will be 7 when St Paul's Dundee have been augmented. So that's quite a high proportion, probably unusually high, of towers with 10 or more bells. So it's a natural thing for us to aim for. So there are 2 routes we could take to trying to work out a new surprise Royal repertoire. We could find methods that are already popular, especially if they have a similar flavour to the standard Maximus methods, if we might want to eventually move from Royal to Maximus. And we can also look at existing compositions of spliced Royal and either just try to ring them or see what methods are in them and think about ringing the methods individually. And the idea here would be that composers think carefully about which methods they want to put into their compositions, and the people we respect as composers, we also respect their judgment about the quality of methods. So let's have a look at some, okay, but I also wanted to say that You know, London, Bristol, Cambridge and Royal, Cambridge and Yorkshire Royal probably are here to stay. But I'm really interested in looking at a slightly more aspirational set of methods once we've mastered the basics with Cambridge and Yorkshire. And so also I'm taking it as a given that we like Bristol, and also London is quite well established as well and worth ringing. And another little comment down at the bottom here is that those modern standard 8 Maximus methods that I talked about, they all have at least some wrong place work in them, many of them quite substantial quantities of wrong place work, and they all have 12th place lead ends. It's quite interesting that those methods are the more popular. And I think this is, I mean, I'm not particularly a chess player, but I do know that when you learn to play chess, you start off with simple king's pawn openings, and then eventually you progress to learning about queen's pawn openings, which are what you usually see in the professional game, and are considered to be, you know, richer and more flexible. And I think this emphasis on wrong place work and plain hunt lead ends rather than seconds place lead ends is a bit like that. Yeah, okay. So let's look at some royal methods. Skura Kurakan is one that we've been ringing quite a lot at the Scottish Association practices in the last year or so, which is going quite well. People have heard me say many times that it's like Zanussi, but on 10. So here it is next to Zanussi. The back work consists of these two sets of points and then treble bob work, and the front work, this region here, is basically like Bristol. These points are in the same place that they are in Bristol, and then there's a half lead dodge, and the half lead dodge is quite a good stabilizing factor. And these sort of twiddly bits, the interface between the back work and the front work, these are not particularly similar in Skura Kurakan and Zanussi. But I mean, that's just too bad. You know, in these kind of methods, these are the bits that you have to pay a bit of attention to as you're going from one rule-based region to another rule-based region. So the next method I would like to go on to in Scotland after Skura Kurakan, if and when we're allowed in the towers again, is a method called Remus, which is this one here. Remus is rather like Phobos. It's got the same back work as Phobos, but the front work's a bit easier. So Phobos has this wrong hunting front work on the front 6. Remus has a forward hunting front work, and again there's a nice stabilizing half lead dodge. And interestingly, Remus was rung and named relatively recently, but the seconds place lead end variation was named first, which is called End of Exams Surprise Royal. I think it might have been rung in Oxford, possibly in the summer term. But I think Remus is a jolly good method. It's starting to appear in compositions of Spliced. You can find some in Composition Library. Clyde is an old favourite, a similar structure to Strathclyde. They're both extensions of Glasgow. Why are they not called Glasgow? I think this may just be historical accident. The rules for method extension have changed from time to time. I think it's possible that if these methods were run now, they might be called Glasgow, but I'm not absolutely sure. But you see Clyde has the same fishtail, treble bob, back work, and on the front, a bit of 3-bell work, and the characteristic 4-5 dodges in 6th place being made. A little aside on Belfast. Belfast seems to get worse the more bells you ring it on. I'm just mentioning it because after mentioning Glasgow, you usually turn to Belfast next on 8. Lockington Royal, which is the 10-bell version, is not too bad. Although Tina will remember a few years ago me coming home after ringing a peal of Lockington and saying, "Oh, I'm never ringing that method again. It's just like Kent, but with more mistakes." The thing is, I think this treble bobbing region sort of goes on a bit too long, and then on the front you've got all this lead, seconds lead, seconds lead, seconds lead, which isn't very exciting. A bit like being stuck in the slow work in Kent. So we're not very keen on Lockington and Belfast. Triton Delight and King's Norton Surprise are two methods with London backwork, so the characteristic fishtails when the treble's in 3/4, and then some treble bob work. Both of these methods have been around for quite a long time. I don't think I've rung either of them, although a few years ago I did listen to the whole of 12,000 of Triton. So they're somewhat similar. The front work in King's Norton is a bit more regular than in Triton. You've just got this wrong hunting work, whereas Triton has some fishtails in 3/4 and 5/6 below the treble, as well as the fishtails in the back work. So that's interesting. So those are methods that we or I at least already knew about. And then we can look at the approach of finding interesting compositions and seeing what methods are in them and seeing what the methods look like. So a couple of years ago, I came across what looked like an interesting set of compositions by David Hull of Spliced Royal. These are all cyclic compositions, but I'm not particularly talking about that now. But these peels have methods from this list here in various combinations. And they look like quite good methods. So these first four we've already discussed. Let's just have a quick look at the others as a source of inspiration. So the first one is called Walsworth. And Walsworth has the same backwork as Skurakurikun, so it's basically like Zanussi. But the front work is just all wrong hunting. It doesn't have the points, it doesn't have the half-lead dodge. So the front work is perhaps a bit more like aerial, although as I said before, the aerial backwork is not exactly the same as the Zanussi backwork. And Walsworth looks like a nice method to try. I think I checked at some point that you can do the same idea on 12 with Zanussi. You can just fill in this wrong hunting on the front instead of the Zanussi front work on 12. And you get a method which I don't think has been rung and named yet. So that's an opportunity for someone to ring it. Next method is Fermanagh, which has Cornwall backwork. So this is interesting. So Cornwall backwork is all right place. You've got these triple dodges and then a far dodge near in 5/6 to stop it repeating. Cornwall backwork is quite a nice one as an introduction to this sort of rule-based rigging because it is right place, it is a bit easier, and you can play around with different things on the front. And we've had a couple of sessions at Scottish practices where we've looked at methods of this kind. And then you can notice that this triple dodging and far dodge near structure, this takes up exactly the same amount of space as the big points in Zanussi. So you can stick Zanussi backwork into these methods. And usually you have to add a seconds place somewhere on the front to stop it becoming false. Cornwall itself doesn't work on 10 because the front work's all based on treble bob hunting. So the bells only get back to the right place if you go up in alternate stages. So Cornwall Maximus is okay and Cornwall 16 is okay, but not Royal or 14. So Fermanagh has this has some points, and then it has this wrong hunting on the front. So that could be interesting. Another method in David Hull's list is called Pollock Shields. So this is it's another Glasgowish one. The back work is the same as Clyde. The front work has a bit more right dodging. So you've got everyone doing this is a sort of bit of right treble bobbing, forward treble bobbing, everyone dodging here while second place is made. So this may be slightly easier below the treble than Clyde. For those not listening in Scotland, Pollock Shields is a district of Glasgow. So that's the reason for the name. And then the last two methods on that David Hull list. First, the excitingly named Orion Nebula, where indeed the name is quite a clue, and this looks very much like a 10-bell version of Orion. So we're really getting to the far end of the difficulty range here. I find it much harder to see how to take advantage of the structure when the methods get this much more complicated. I don't think I've ever rung Orion. I'm sure there are people around, possibly some of them who are listening, who would say, oh, but Simon, Orion is just blah, blah, blah. And maybe it would all become very, very easy, but not quite there yet. But anyway, Orion Nebula could be a challenge for the future. And then there's Eagle Nebula, which looks a bit more like Rigel on the front. So it looks like an easier version. Although the back work is not exactly the same as Orion Nebula. So this little placey bit isn't in Orion Nebula. There's a bit of a variation there. But again, that could be something to aspire to. So just to wrap up, I've probably spoken for longer than I said I was going to. But I think we have this, you know, this area of surprise royal, which falls in between the surprise major, which is the staple of red zone ringing, and surprise maximus, which has been highly developed by a few advanced bands. Royal doesn't receive quite the same attention. I think the surprise royal repertoire does deserve an overhaul, and it should be inspired by the Black Zone surprise maximus repertoire rather than by the old surprise major repertoire. And just to say again, all of these methods we've been looking at have high degrees of regularity and a lot of structure if you look at it in the right way. And the key to getting onto ringing these kind of methods is working out how to take advantage of all that structure. And I'm not necessarily advocating ringing purely by the grid. Some people probably would advocate that, but it's not what I do myself. But I feel that if you take a method like Skura Royal and approach it as 9 separate play spells that each have to be learned, or possibly 4.5 play spells if you take into account their reverses. If you approach it like that and just sit down to study each play spell, you're really missing out on something that will make life very, very much easier. The first thing to look at is the grid to see what regularity is there, and then start thinking about how to use that regularity to help you learn the line, if that's the way that you ring.